Alright everybody, my name is Jeff Brackett here at LincolnDrumLessons.com. I am a drum teacher in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm here in my drum studio. I've got a drum practice pad here, and I'm going to be talking about grip. So this is a free video that you can use. It's going to probably run anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes, just discussing the grip and the proper setup and the technique in case you're a new student getting started. And even if you're not a new student, it does not hurt to watch this video because I see a lot of people doing this stuff wrong. And if you can play one drum right, you can play 500 drums right. So here's the deal. The first thing we're going to talk about is the muscle groups. So there's going to be 3 main muscle groups that you're going to be using when you're playing the drums. And the biggest one is the arm. So unless you're going to be playing on MTV anytime soon, you're not really going to need to be using a lot of crazy arm motions as you're playing, especially if you're getting started. We're just going to actually start with the next muscle group down, which is the wrist. So the wrist is not as powerful as the arms, but it is faster. Okay, so when we're making these only using our wrist motion to play, alright, we're going to be able to play a little bit quicker. Still pretty powerful, but not as powerful as the arms. The next muscle group and the last one that we're going to be using is the fingers. So these are going to be even faster. I'll turn sideways here so you can see. Hopefully you can see that. So they can be faster, but they're not going to be as strong. So they all have their place, and we can use them all. We can even use most of them at the same time. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But whenever you're playing, you want to be thinking, are you using arms? Are you using wrist? Are you using fingers? All right, we call those the 3 power points. So the next thing you need to think about is where are you going to grip this stick at? So in other words, are you going to hold it up high by the tip, or down low, or in the middle? You have to figure out where that is. As you play longer, you're going to be able to figure out the best balance point for your stick. For now, what I want you to try and do is take a drumstick, and if you go just behind center, so just a little bit behind center, you should find a spot where the stick is going to basically balance on its own, or pretty close to it, without you doing much to it. So a lot of times it's going to be a little bit behind center because the front is trimmed down a little bit, so there's not as much weight on the front, so you have to come back a little bit farther to make that match. So that's not where you want to hold the stick, but that's a good starting point. What you can do is you're going to start pulling back a little bit and let the stick bounce. And at first, it's going to be going pretty slowly. And as you pull back farther, you're going to find the stick is going to bounce more on its own. And you can continue on all the way to the very end of the stick. If you hold it from here and bounce, it's just going to die pretty quickly. Too much weight on the front of the stick. So that means you've gone too far. So your job is to start towards the middle and work your way back until you find a point where you feel like the stick is bouncing the most on its own. And that's what we're going to call the balance point. It's usually about 2/3 of the way down the stick. It just depends on the weight of your stick and what kind of stick you're using. So once you find that point, that's where you're going to mark it visually, or some people actually mark it on their stick. But that's where the fulcrum is going to be at. And the fulcrum is the pivoting point, just like a teeter-totter, where that stick is going to pivot. So right from here, and that's going to happen on your stick with your thumb and your first finger. So you're basically, let's see if you can take a look at this. You're basically having your thumb flat, pointing right down the stick, and then this other finger wrapped around. And that point is going to be your fulcrum point right there, that pinching point right there. And that's super important that that stays closed, and that is the point that's going to continue to hold, all right, to hold the stick. The job of the other fingers, the other 3 fingers, let's see if you can see this. These 2 for sure, if your pinky can't reach down, that's fine, as long as it's touching your 4th finger or your ring finger, as long as it's not flying off out to the side. Make sure you pull that back down. Alright, so these fingers here going straight, well, almost straight down, and then you've got your fulcrum point right here, which is those 2 fingers. Okay, so these fingers never come off. We'll talk about that more later. So the idea here is if your fingers are going down and you've got the right balance point, then you should be able to have a point with your stick and have a straight line, as straight as you can, between your arms and your wrists and your fingers. And everything will be in line and everything will be straight. That way, when you're playing, if you need to use arms, you can use arms. If you need to use some wrist with the arm, you can do that. If you need some fingers with the wrist and the arm, they're all in the same row, and so you can use them. Now the problem people run into is when they start gripping the stick around, their fingers around like this. You don't want to do that. It's like a baseball bat or a golf club or something. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure these fingers are down the stick this way. It takes a little while to figure that out. But if you are gripping it wrapped around that way, when you go to play the drum, you'll see people start to have to rotate their wrists because they're holding the sticks in a way that's not lined up with the arms, wrists, and fingers, right? So if you can straighten this out and point this way, now that doesn't mean, by the way, that you're going to be going straight from yourself to the pad. You might have an angle from here. So in other words, you want to have a little space between your arm and your ribs. But the part from your elbow to the tip of the stick should be straight. All right, so that's the thing there.